Everybody, welcome back. We're on lesson number 4, the first video here of Luke part 1. This is an amazing chapter. It's interesting, you do 1 week of homework in one chapter, you think, oh, that'll be easy. A lot of stuff in here. So let's go through just the basics and the big picture of everything. The first part that we're looking at is chapter 6, I believe, verses 1 through 11. And Jesus and his disciples were walking through a field. They were parting a field. We don't know why they were going through the field like that. We do know that it's a Sabbath because the whole setting of these first encounters has to do with the Sabbath. And so are they taking a Sabbath shortcut? The Jewish leadership had established all these rules and regulations related to Sabbath, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And so were they trying to adhere to the Sabbath distance that they could walk, which some say is about 1,000 yards, or were they simply hungry and they were going to go through and get something to eat? Now, it wasn't illegal according to the law for them to get something to eat. It was okay to glean off the edges of a field or something like that, or even to take what you needed. So what we find interesting is that the Pharisees are there. Why are they there? Okay, the Pharisees are always around. They seem to be following Jesus everywhere. Well, the disciples picked or plucked the grain. We don't know if it was wheat or corn or what it was. They rubbed it with their hands, and then they ate. Well, the Pharisees immediately declared this to be unlawful, and it was unlawful in a multitude of ways according to their law. The plucking broke one law, the rubbing together was something else, the eating was something else in the way that they had done it. Well, the Pharisees questioned the disciples, but Jesus responded. You see him responding when the disciples are questioned here initially, and he responded in the same way we saw him respond with Satan. He quoted the scripture and he says, hey, have you not read what happened to David in 1 Samuel? Well, of course they had, and how David and his men had eaten bread that had been offered to the Lord. At the end of a week, they would take that bread up off the table as showbread in the Mosaic tabernacle, and the priest could eat the bread. Jewish tradition says that bread remained warm the whole week, by the way. And so the priest let David have this bread, which was quote unquote unlawful for them to eat. Now they knew this story, and the whole picture of what we're seeing here is what we're about to see in the next encounter with the Sabbath, is that the Lord is saying that the Sabbath wasn't the type of thing that you were supposed to worship. Okay, man wasn't created for the Sabbath, but Sabbath was created for the man. It's better to do good. And the Pharisees knew this already because they had all sorts of rules and regulations of what you could do on the Sabbath. They had determined that it would be okay to save a life on the Sabbath, for instance, that type of thing. So they knew these things. Jesus, like I said, had used the scripture. Then he says this. He declares the Son of Man is the Lord of Sabbath. He was declaring himself to be Lord of Sabbath, but they weren't quite sure what he was saying yet. We see in the next encounter that it was on another Sabbath day that something else occurred. The Lord of Sabbath, Jesus, is teaching in the synagogue, as was his habit. And the Pharisees and the scribes, they were listening, and they were looking for a reason to accuse him. And Jesus knew this. So Jesus, he didn't back off these things. Quite often, he would set them up. So he asked them a question. Is it okay, or is it better to do good or do harm on the Sabbath? And he invited a man that he saw with a withered hand, okay, a hand that was drawn up. Jesus initiated this encounter. After he called the man forward, he looked at everybody around there and asked him which is better to do, good or harm. And he told the man to stretch out his hand, and he was healed. Isn't that amazing? Well, of course, everybody rejoiced, right? No. The scribes and Pharisees were furious, okay? And then they began to discuss what to do with or what to do about Jesus. You start to see the friction increasing. Hey, I thank you for your study and for pressing on. I'll see you again next time.